All right, so let me show you how, if I'm a tenant, I can really drag this thing out. So rent's due on the 1st. Man, I can even really drag this thing out. So I got to be a little bit careful here because this has to assume that the landlord is actually competent and is Johnny on the spot with this, because most landlords are not, and they've got more things going on than trying to deal with an eviction. So it's not pleasant at all. Most of the time, evictions go longer than they should, just because they're unpleasant. So, but here's the tenant really working the system. Rent is due on the 1st. It's late on the 3rd. Landlord's not going to do anything. Landlord's at this point, he might do something. Landlord prepares the 3-day notice, gets it to the server. Server serves it on the 7th. 1, 2, 3. Can't count the weekends. So this is the day that we can actually do something with the 4-day summons. Now the tenant comes along with the ones who false fund, or let's say even himself, and he pays half the rent, and the landlord accepts it. Now there's an argument to be said that once you accept the rent, and it depends which attorney you talk to, but some attorneys will say once you accept the rent, you've created a payment plan and you have to start the 3-day summons over again. And so let's say our landlord accepts this payment on the 13th. He immediately has to turn around on the 13th and go serve that notice of 3-day pay or quit again. Get served on the 14th. 1, 2, 3. Can't count the holidays and weekends, and now we're on the 20th. Now we tell most of our owners, not to accept rent, and we won't accept rent if we're going down the eviction route because we know we have to start the process over. And so on the 20th, we get it to the attorney. He draws it up. He gets it served on the 21st. This is the 4-day summons. 1, 2, 3. Can't count the weekends. There's 4. The first day we can do something is here. We draft it up to the judge, send it off to the judge. I'm sorry, let's back up. No, this is how the tenant's going to work this out. So I'm sorry, the 4-day is up here. So somewhere in here, actually, the tenant responds and says, no, I don't think you're right. I want to get in front of a judge. And as soon as he requests that, he's responded. And so we can't request and move for a default judgment anymore because the tenant didn't respond. Because he responded, we have to now request a hearing. So we request a hearing. They grant us a hearing, depending on how booked the court is. And if we're in a situation, right, where we have tons of evictions because everybody lost their job and nobody's paying rent, guess what? These things are going to get pushed out numerous weeks, right? It's pretty easy to get pushed 2 to 3 weeks out before you have a hearing in front of the court. And is the court even in session given the COVID and the social distancing and all that stuff? So I can only imagine that the courts are clogged, slow, just like everything else is slow. Every other business is slow. You got to imagine the courts are slow too. But anyway, even if it's not COVID, let's act like it's not COVID. So we get in front of the judge. We get something scheduled. Let's say it's 3 weeks out. So that was the 28th. So now we get 1, 2, 3. We get in front of the judge about the 19th. Again, we get a judgment against the tenant. Finally, generally the judge will almost always give them some time to be out, right? He's not going to give you a judgment and say, get out today. He'll give them another 7 days to get out. And so now you got the 25th. We give it to the sheriff. Tenant doesn't move out. Give it to the sheriff. He gets it here. He puts a notice on the door here and says, hey, you got to be out by the 1st. And so now we've basically gotten 2 months out of the deal. From the 1st, we didn't pay rent, or we started not to pay rent, paid a little bit to extend the process, and now it's 2 months later before we actually have a complete eviction. And that's how a tenant can really lengthen the process out. Also, he can go to East River Legal Service, get free legal counsel, and this is exactly what East River does: is they just buy time. They buy time like crazy while the landlord is paying an attorney the entire time. The East River Legal is just bleeding the clock and costing the owner money. Because you got to think about it. The owner is losing 2 months' rent in this case. He's paying legal fees. If this goes to court and he has to pay that attorney to go to court, the minimum eviction cost is about $850 from an attorney, $500 to $850. $500 is the cheapest you'll ever get. $850 is more in line. And once you go to court, it's right away $2,000. And that's if you win. And then you can get that back from the tenant, but good luck collecting it. So you're out 2 months worth of rent. That's worth about $1,500 to $2,000, plus you got $2,000 in legal fees. You got $4,000 plus whatever damages are into this thing. So that property owner is hurting at this point.